Coming to you from beyond the final frontier, it's Archaeodeath.
Wow, I'm live again. Right, here we go. Welcome, TikTok community, to my 16,000 live, my 16,000 followers live. And just to, while people slowly shuffle into the older live phenomenon, just want to say welcome, to tell you that I'm on holiday officially. I'm allegedly on holiday. That's the argument anyway. And all the holidays consisted of so far is me being ill. And the illness has been involving being COVID-19, it turned out. COVID-19! Yeah, I'm COVID-19 riddled with it, but I'm on the way to recovery. And I've got wine, which I believe some doctor somewhere on the internet said cures it if I put it in bleach and then suck it up my nose and then blast it out my... Anyway, no, I'm being silly. Yeah, wine. I'm about 5-6 days into it, all the worst of it out of the way, dealing with first night of good sleep last night. So, the other 6 nights don't count. I've just hardly been sleeping, so it's all right, road to recovery. Live forever, I will. Or at least until I die, which is my plan. Live until I die. Breathe until I stop. Drink until I something. Anyway, there's a rock song lyric in there somewhere, I'm sure. Talking of rock song lyrics, there's an amazing number of rock songs that have archaeological inspiration and themes in them, or at least vague allusions. And I came across this one just the other day, which is brilliant, a brilliant song. Because like all of Dick Valentine's lyrics from Electric Six, none of them make any sense. But this one particularly brilliant because this is the song Clusterfuck from their album Zodiac. And the lyrics begin, and this is not really relevant to my topic of my life, but I've got something to start off to get you warmed up. In the writings of the Druids lie the recipe for Druid fluid. Sounds like a most refreshing drink to me. That is only one of a series of archaeological themes in Electric Six's lyrics in the back catalogue of their many extensive and excellent rock, disco, funk, mashup albums. And I thought it would serve to sort of encapsulate something about how I feel right now. I don't know what it tells you, but anyway, I think it may be the Jubilee caused all of this. I blame COVID and the Jubilee. Anyway, yeah. So I promised the 16,000 follower live celebration to be an opportunity for me to answer some of your pressing questions, because I know that my hordes of admiring fans out there are craving answers to the many important archaeological questions of our age, of our time. And they look to me, they tell me they look to me, or at least I imagine they look to me for the answers. And in that regard, I did a post yesterday saying, hello, I'm going live. And people ask me some questions. I've got one question. I think one is, it's not really pitched as a question. I'm interpreting as a question about a forthcoming project. So I'll get along to that one. Hey, up to various people. Well, oh, there's a Yorkshireman in. Hello. And there's no snorting wine. It was just a metaphor for snorting wine. This is my glass claw beaker, it looks a bit black on the screen, but it's a dark green glass, a replica of a 6th century glass claw beaker, which I'm going to quaff as I go. I'm not in Suffolk, to be exact. I'm in Wrexham County Borough, the newly appointed city of Wrexham. We are one of the new cities, although we failed to get the City of Culture 2025, where the stand-in loony drunky mad aunt Nadine Dorries announced was Bradford, of which I know very well, and Bradford deserves all they can get. They need all the help they can get. And I wish them luck. But Wrexham is now a new city, thanks to QE2. Don't know what it means, don't know what it matters, but we are a city. And so I live in the city, the city limits of Wrexham now. So North East Wales. So welcome from North East Wales. Will I go over to Iraq and see the city they've discovered? No, I'm not. No immediate plans to travel to Iraq. I get invites to random conferences in various parts of the world, but usually they're scams. Will you write a paper for a journal called the Journal of Archaeology? And also, it's a very profitable. It's only a very, very respectable rate. You only have to pay us $200 to publish in our journal. And then, would you like to come to this international conference called the Conference of Archaeology? And it'll be held at a resort somewhere. And it's all a scam. But no, I do get invites mainly to Greek islands all the time. But of course, I've got to pay masses of money to go there. But maybe I'll get an exotic. I used to have more jollies where used to get funding to go to international conferences, but I haven't been to a few of them because they're it means dealing with other archaeologists, and not all of them are as lovely as me, and I get a bit sick of them. But anyway, that's another story. I'm already rambling, and I said I wouldn't ramble. But yeah, what was I going to tell you about? Yeah, questions people ask me. One question people have been asking me about what my research is about, what my active ongoing research is about. And I mentioned in a little joke, doing a lip sync of Michael Caine from Austin Powers 2, the film. I said that I was working with a Dutch archaeologist. Yeah, so I'm doing a book project. Hello, little wag. I'm doing a book project with Femke Lippok, who is a doctoral researcher on the project called Rural Riches, and she's based at Leiden University, a very prestigious university in the southern Netherlands. And we are doing a project based on our mutual interest in the archaeology of early medieval cremation, burning the dead. And I did my doctoral research on the archaeology of early Anglo-Saxon period cremation practices back in 2000 at the University of Reading, and I've published chapters, articles and books on cremation in the early Middle Ages and in cross-period discussions ever since. And Femke is a bright young new person in the field, and she has been publishing a very important paper from 2020 in the journal World Archaeology on early medieval cremation practices in the Netherlands and other parts of Northwest Europe, and Belgium as well. She looks at bits of Luxembourg, and I think she went over to the edges of northern Germany. And her paper is really almost says the identical kind of things I was saying 20 years ago about early Anglo-Saxon cremation, but looking at a much more rigorous, bigger sample on the continent. And so we've decided to team up and do a book on early medieval cremation. And we're going to do a book in a different way. We're going to do a book by interview. So the last 2 years, we've been actually interviewing scholars, transcribing our interviews, asking them specific questions, asking them to add citations, add the rigorous data to back up their arguments. And we're going to publish this book as a series of conversations almost. So the style of writing is going to be a bit managed. It's going to be heavily edited. So it's not just like a recording what people say. It's going to be a heavily structured set of interviews with fact boxes, images, citations to back up everything we say. But it's still going to have the vibe, the feel of a conversation in print. So we're doing that book, and we've got 15 interviews done now with 14 archaeologists. We interviewed one guy twice because he's an expert in Polish archaeology and Norwegian archaeology. So we interviewed him once about Western Norway and once about the Western Slavs. But we've got these interviews together and working through and editing them, and it'll be the first ever edited book. I mean, it'll be an academic book, but it will be written in a style that I think will be of interest to a broader readership about early medieval cremation practices. And the backstory is that while we know that there's a lot of ways in which, from the archaeological record, we have our evidence for disposal of the dead in early medieval Europe, it's a really important source of information to understand what's happening after Rome and the societies living in Northwest Europe, the barbarian successor states traditionally called, from the 5th to the 11th centuries. Most of the focus has been on inhuming the dead, of grave goods placed with unburnt bodies, or after Christianization, a move more towards unfurnished burial, occurring in field cemeteries and then around churches. But the cremation evidence has tended to be neglected, and it's only in the last couple of decades where more osteological work, now stable isotope work, has been done with cremated remains. Now aDNA can be extracted from cremated human remains. That cremation is telling us a lot about the society, the religion, the ideology, and the economy of these societies and their complexity. So that's my answer to the question that was put to me in the chat, is that what what's this book with Femke, with this Dutch person, this Femke, about, and it's going to be about the archaeology of early medieval cremation. We're going to call it something like, we'll probably add a silly title because I've got to have a more burning puns in it. I've done various puns about cremation. The serious title will be Cremation in the Early Middle Ages, and we haven't got a publisher yet. But who needs publishers? They are but minions. They will publish what I send them. Well, we shall see. We haven't got a publisher yet. We've got some ideas for great publishers, but we are going to hopefully get that out in 2023. Anyway, thoughts on the recent Great Reset in the World Economic Forum? Just a thank you, Max Willis 7. I have no thoughts on that, other than we're all probably doomed anyway. From an archaeological perspective, looking at the long term, we're all just winding down to the next ice age. Okay? And nothing is going to change that. And even global warming won't hold it off for long. Either that, or we're heading to the next Cretaceous, and it'll be so hot the dinosaurs will come back. So we've either got mammoths coming over one hill, T-Rexes coming over the other, and whatever economic plans you have in the middle are absolutely royally clucked. That's my theory. That's my Great Reset World Economic Forum theory. And I took literally milliseconds thinking that up. And I think it's going to be us trying to broker power with the dinos or the mammoths. I'm going to put my money on the mammoths. I think I've seen all of the Ice Age films, and they always come out on top one way or another. I wouldn't have thought there would have been a lot of cremation in medieval times. You say that. Absolutely rammed with cremation. Absolutely rammed with cremation. Cremation takes a comeback in some parts of the early medieval northwestern Europe in the early Middle Ages. Jade 1804. It is on the way back. Comes back in most of the early Middle Ages is a time where the church doesn't have a real control over burial rites at all, and they don't seem to care too much about what people do with the dead. So it's not simply about cremation, Christianity being loose or not fully established, but that is the backdrop. And in that period, and in this period, there's a whole diversity of different burial practices, and cremation is found in many different forms. So yeah, I could talk for hours about cremation in the early Middle Ages. I won't, but I'm just saying I could, but I won't, but I could. I won't, but I could. John has only found out that Stonehenge, 2 words, it's 1 word, mate, but let's not get into this. Let's not be pedantic. It's keyboards, it's phones. You know, who am I to mock people for spelling mistakes with the number of spelling mistakes I do? Wasn't built by the Druids. And question mark. Or was that exclamation mark that went wrong as a question mark. Well, I'm glad you now know that the Druids had nothing to do with Stonehenge. You can't say Stonehenge, you have to say Stonehenge. I'm glad you now know that. And now that you know that, I feel hopefully new vistas of knowledge will open up before you without needing any further reading or research. You know, that's like a keystone. And once you've plugged into that, out from that will come beams of knowledge light, you know, as happens in magical moments in children's cartoons and stuff, you know, that suddenly you will be connected into the world wide web of archaeological knowledge. And once you've realized that the Druids probably didn't exist in any way and shape and form that we think we know them, and they certainly had fuck all to do with Stonehenge, then it's a step on that journey, my friend. It's a step on that road to enlightenment, or so some people would have you believe. We won't talk about the Celts. Where did our disconnect with death start? Okay, can I tackle that one? That's a fantastic question, because you know, the whole point of archaeology is that we have been mocked as a subject since the 18th and early 19th century for our requirement, our interest in going into the abandoned places, going into the discarded, the ancient tombs, the ancient settlements and cemeteries of ancient peoples, and using that evidence to tell the story of 99% of the people that never left written records, and 99% of the times where there was no written records for people to keep. So we are the subject that tells the story of the human past, and a lot of that is telling the story of how different communities and societies disposed of their dead. I've just been reading a paper of the latest research today about the the Chinchoro mummies, the oldest artificial mummification processes known, which date back 7,000 years in the Atacama Desert region of Peru, of modern country of Peru, on the western coast of South America. And that's just one of many different complex traditions of treating the dead that we find in the archaeological record from societies and communities that, otherwise are unknown to history, And we find that in the time that humans have been sedentary and settled, fishing, hunting, gathering, then later farming, they deal with the dead in a host of different ways. They treat the dead with respect, and at least some of them, and dispose of the different categories of person according to social identity in different ways, with different expenditures, different modes of disposal. And and yet we haven't forgotten the dead, but we have moved our world away from direct and intimate contact with the dead. And this is what's often been discussed by Jeffrey Gora since the 50s and 60s. I think it's 1965, his book. As the modern taboo, that death has replaced sex as our taboo, our Western taboo, that we fear death. And there's been a lot of critiques of that model, that assumption that we actually fear death and that we have distanced ourselves from the dead. And in fact, a lot of people say that that's, while we have medicalization, hospitalization, most people do not die at home. Most people do not die. Most people go through their childhood perhaps not even seeing a corpse, or not seeing many corpses. And by the time the person does die, they are removed from the sight of children. So we're not inculcated into the regularity, the corporeality of death. So there's lots of reasons why people say we are death distanced. And you could put that journey as recently as the post-Second World War era, or you could put it back into the professionalization of a funerary industry in the 19th century. Or you could, but it is a modern phenomenon in the West, the global North, if you like. And part of that is modern cremation. Cremation has become, and is seen by many, as a modern death way, as a modern way of dealing with the dead that separates us from the dead. And there's lots of qualifiers here, and I'm not saying this is everything I believe. This is some of the simple introduction points that people make. And what I would say is that the archaeological record, archaeology as a discipline, is a construction of the same world. And while we've tended to see the birth of modern archaeology as a desire to push back our knowledge of the human story, as we've got more rigorous scientific methods to push back, as geology pushed back the story of the planet's history, natural history, archaeology pushes back the story of humankind to looking at human evolution and the development since the last ice age of farming societies and so on. One of the other functions I've seen archaeology doing with the rise of professionalization, medicalization of death through the late 19th and 20th centuries it's been one of the ways in which our modern society has found access to death in the distant past in a manageable, almost passable way. But it's not our death, it's other cultures' death. So our obsession with Egyptology, there's many reasons why we're interested in Egyptology. Our interest in the Greco-Roman world, our interest in the European Middle Ages, our interest in prehistoric tombs. All of these are subsections of archaeological research, and all of them are not just about the dead. But I would contend one of the ways in which archaeology has developed as a subject is tapping into that popular fascination with our mortality that modern science has almost taken away from us. And that's why I find that while I obviously look at it from an academic and a scientific perspective, I am not dismissive or patronizing towards those that look to ancient monuments, ancient societies for inspiration, solace, reflection on their own mortality today, whether it's motivated spiritually or intellectually or contemplatively. I see that there's a lot of ways in which archaeology's engagement with mortality speaks to our present and our future as we go forward, and then we develop new ways of dealing with the dead. So that Annie Bell 34, that's my long gaff of an answer to say it starts in the late 19th and 20th centuries, but archaeology has developed at the same time as we have become increasingly distanced from the dead. And I think that it is one of the legitimate avenues by which we can now get close to the dead. We can get close to the face of a bog body, not necessarily physically. We can in a museum, but we can get close to the stories of Ötzi, the Iceman from the Chalcolithic of the Alps. We can get close to the story and the lives of Egyptian pharaohs. And while we tend to gravitate towards the great and the good, the wealthy tombs in the popular sources, we can also touch the lives of people whose names are never known to us, of children that may have only lived a few weeks, to old people who's lived in the Iron Age of a particular part of Ireland, or that we'll never be able to get back. There's no written sources for these people. The archaeology is the testimony. The archaeology is their legacy. Almost like you can see it as our responsibility as archaeologists is to tell their stories. So when people say, "Oh, archaeology is desecrating and disrespectful," I say, "Well, yeah, it can be, but it can also be an important way in which we allow the stories of ancient people to be told again, to rejoin our society and our sort of cultural bank of ideas and memories." That's my positive take on what archaeology is. So archaeology is a way of connecting following this disconnection in a crude sense, and there's lots of qualifiers. John, I don't know if that's the fact you get all your archaeological insights from me, is that really something that I should be proud of or you should be bragging about? I mean, it's random musings from the back of my brain, addled by COVID and wine. I'm not sure that does us, either of us, any credit, but I take that point. I recognise that point. I'll reflect on that point, and at some point that point will become, I will own that point and celebrate that point. Thank you. So we're talking about archaeology, and in any shape or form, really. And so far I've answered questions about my ongoing archaeological research as a professor of archaeology. I'm doing a book. I'm doing a book on the cremation in early medieval Europe, but there is also something else I can share you, an exclusive. And this involves me moving my camera around so you can see a little bit of my my second computer screen, because after 2 years of work, two and a half years of work, I have literally the final draft, unless I accidentally on a live press delete all. I have the Adobe InDesign version of my next book, one of my next books. So I'm going to show you that. Okay, this is a book that stemmed from a student conference in January 2020. So I held a conference at the Grosvenor Museum in Chester, and we discussed a very controversial subject: the public archaeology of treasure, looking at how archaeology works in the modern world. So public archaeology, the way we communicate, the way we do our research, how we work with treasure. So it's co-edited by Peter Reevell, who's a brilliant archaeologist, a landscape archaeologist and an artifact specialist, a prehistorian, but I don't hold that against him. And the wonderful Sammy Clegg, who's one of my students, who's just finished his MA with us at Chester. He did his undergraduate degree at Chester and then he did his MA, and also involved the contributions of students. But the public archaeology of treasure, edited by Howard Williams, Peter Reevell and Sammy Clegg. And it's going to come out, I'm doing all the design work because it's coming out with Archaeopress, and if I do this for free, even more free labour, I get it open access without having to pay for it. And that's our introduction, the public archaeology of treasure, with 3 of my students, Sammy, Natasha and James. I want to share that with you because this is going to go off to the publisher literally as soon as I finish reading the rest of it. I'm proof reading all the final bits and pieces, and this book is going to be free online, but you can buy a copy if you want. I'll be doing promotions probably a few months till it actually reaches shelves, as if anyone's going to stock it in a bookshop, But I mean, Archaeopress are a really well-established academic publisher, and they do distribute and sell books all around the world, And this is the first time there's been a book on the public archaeology of treasure, would you think? So it's not exactly mortuary archaeology, although actually, because I'm editor, a lot of the chapters deal with funerary stuff. So grave robbers robbing sites, looting, archaeological sites. There's some great papers in here by professional archaeologists, by my students. I've got a paper in there as well. Well, you know, I'm lead author of the introduction. I've got a paper talking about Sutton Hoo, which is obviously one of the most famous early Anglo-Saxon burial sites. So yeah, that's another thing I've been up to. So as well as doing the book on cremation in the early Middle Ages, I got a book on the public archaeology of treasure, and this is the fifth of these student volumes I've produced. Basically, what I thought, if I'm going to do these conferences with students, I'll bring them out as books. So I did one in 2019 called The Public Archaeology of Death. It's all on public archaeology. So not about what we know about the past, but how do we work in the present? You know, how do archaeologists communicate, research, engage with audience? So Public Archaeology of Death. Then I did a book called about art and how we use art and visual representation in archaeology. So Public Archaeology, Arts of Engagement. I co-edited that with my colleague, Dr. Caroline Pudney and Afnan Azuddin, who's a friend and former student. Now I'm an English teacher, works in Japan. And then that was also 2019. Then 2020, as the pandemic hit, this never got a book launch. Pauline Clark, my doctoral researcher, and I produced this book, Digging into the Dark Ages, Early Medieval Public Archaeology. So looking at, this is the biggest book ever. Still smells fresh. Smell a fresh book. I know it's a strange habit, but sniffing book spines is actually legitimate and legal and gives me a natural high. You can tell anyone, I don't care. They can't sack me for that. It's legal. And most recently, my last edited book, Public Archaeology of Frontiers and Borderlands. And this I co-edited with Kieran Gleave, who's now doing his Masters at Cambridge. He's doing an MPhil at Cambridge. And Pauline, again, my doctoral researcher, looking at the public interface with borderland territories. So we look at everything from the US-Mexican border to Northern Ireland, everywhere like that is in this book. All sorts of borderlands and walls I discussed. So we've got 4 books out, 4 of these mothers. So 4 books in 2 years, and then the pandemic hit, and so the 5th one is delayed, and I didn't get it out last year, and so it's out this year. So it would have been 5 books in 3 years, which is pretty prolific for academics. But life happened last year, and it didn't get finished. But so that's what I'm working on. So now you're ahead of the curve. You know the latest research coming out. I've got another book coming out as well. Oh yeah, I can show you this one as well. Hang on, I've got 3 books coming out. So the Archaeology of Cremation, that'll be out probably next year. Public Archaeology of Treasure, and let me just show you. Let me waft at you. I can show you. This is just coming proofs. This is a proof station. This is literally going off to the publisher as soon as I can get around to reading it, and it's called. And this is an editing work. This is not authored. I haven't authored this, but there's a very good friend of mine called Professor Di Morgan Evans, and he's a bit of a legend in Welsh and British archaeology, because he was one of the people. He was an inspector before there was Cadw. He was an inspector in Wales for the old department, and then he went to what was to become English Heritage. He then joined English Heritage when English Heritage came into existence. And he was one of their inspectors. And he also inspired me. When I came to Chester in 2008, Di basically was very supportive, encouraged me to do field work. He was a great dude. And so when he passed away in 2017, I decided to pull together all his life's work into a single edited book. So I want to show you this. No one's seen this before. So this is another brand new reveal. So this is Archaeologies and Antiquaries, essays by Di Morgan Evans, edited by myself, Cara Critchell, and his widow, Sheena Evans. And in that, this is basically a 300-page book collecting all of his publications previously published, but not really available to people in one place. And some of it is quite eclectic, but some of it is really good. And not many people have read it because, like articles by an author appearing in different places, no one's going to find them in those different places. So I've pulled them all together, and that's been 3-4 years' work. And that book's going to come out. So I should get 2 books out this year, 1 book out next year, and then I'm going to get on to writing my monograph. Anyway, that's to give you a little bit of update of what I'm doing. Let's have a look at what other people are talking about in the chat so I can see if there's any other questions I can answer. I am answering any questions people have. I'm waiting for questions. Let me just keep going down. But monograph, yes, I do have a monograph. I've got 2 monographs planned and half written that I've left aside. One monograph's called Death Today, Archaeology of Us. and I'm going to be looking at the mortuary archaeology of us. I'm not going to be digging up any of you or your relatives, but I'm going to be looking at the landscapes, the churchyards, the cemeteries, the memorials of our landscape today, including our museums and heritage sites, so the traces of distant times, but also looking at our 19th, 20th and 21st century spaces. So crematoria architecture and landscapes, the material cultures of death, roadside shrines, ash scattering sites. I've got a book I want to write about that. So that's still coming. And I've got another book I'm writing, which is about early medieval monumentality and memory. So how did monuments work to commemorate the dead? Well, you imagine if someone dies, you stick up a cross or you stick up a mound and that commemorates them. Is it that simple? Well, no. And I'm going to be talking in that book about how we can look in new ways at how early medieval people remembered their dead ancestors, heroes, legends, gods, but also saints, kings, and their local community mainly. Yeah, so they're the two books, the two monographs I hope to write after I finish these 3 edited books, if I'm still alive. Otherwise, someone can write a book about my death. And then maybe the travel guides will come then. And I like the idea of 100 great British places of death. That's a brilliant title. I'm going to write that down. Because you've got to have 100 great. Everything's got to be great now. Great British, hasn't it? The Great British English Bake Off on Ice, Love Island. The Great British Dig. The Great British, swindle of our society. The Great British Lockdown Party Break. Whatever it is. If you put Great British in it, it sounds kind of cool, and it all comes from the Great British. It's everything's great, isn't it? Alfred the Great, Great Train Robbery. I like that. Okay, we've got a question from John here that isn't just about displaying his reliance on my ignorance or his ignorance about my reliance or something. I got one for you. Which TV show just gets it right, from your professional opinion? Just gets it right. Just gets the past right, or Archaeologist right? Well, let's do that. What is the best representation of the archaeological past in a TV show? Historic period, like that relies on archaeological evidence a lot. I don't watch enough. I'm just thinking, which would be the best that tries to deliver, really do a good job. Well, I mean, there's always, everyone whinges about everything being off and wrong, and I've said that. But if I was going to a TV show, none of them get it just right, do they? Even if it's down to the details of what are the breeds of chicken, someone will complain. What is the most fun and interesting TV show for the early Middle Ages? I still stand by Vikings being the most interesting and fun and engaging, but it's not accurate in any way. But I've talked about that ad nauseum, so I don't want to go back over that stuff. But I'll just go for Vikings, just because I think it's got lots of mad ideas in it. So I'll stick with that one. From the perspective of archaeologists, portrayal of archaeologists, and how archaeologists themselves are portrayed in their professional career, I'm going to give a controversial answer, but I've just got to show you the cover of the DVD. 1 second. Bone kickers. Everyone mocked it because it was so ludicrous, and yet it's not accurate, but it has deep-seated truths about archaeologists and how archaeologists see themselves in this TV show because of who they got to be a consultant for it. I will say no more. So it's pretty fun. But in terms of TV drama, this is unwatchable and yet essential watching. It's essential viewing. Hugh Bonville. Julie Graham. It's truly wrong, and yet I must remind you of its existence in the context of a representation of archaeologists on TV. If you want to go to film, if films can be included, John, then I would say, having slagged it off, I do concede that the Northman's, the attention to detail of the material culture is unassailable. It is the best representation of the Viking Age we have in terms of attention to detail of clothing. I still thought it was bollocks, but I thought the attention to detail in clothing was superb. In terms of how archaeologists are portrayed in film, then The Dig, as I've talked about in other lives and other contexts from last year, Ray Fives, Kerry Mulligan, while manipulating the storyline and misrepresenting the characters, their ages and behaviours, it is a representation carefully crafted to look like the 1939 excavation of Sutton Hoo. So I have to say, The Northman and The Dig in film are the two things that are most accurate, get right most. The Dig about archaeology and archaeologists in the 1930s, The Northman about late 9th, early 10th century Viking North Atlantic world and Russian river systems. The differences between them, I loved The Dig and I hated The Northman, but those are my answers. Now I will catch up with some comments because I can imagine Great British Revival of the Dinosaurs. It's going to happen, mate. You can't deny it. Mammoths and dinosaurs. You can see the film, like Alien versus Predator, Mammoths versus T-Rex. And I forgot one thing I forgot to say is the subtitle. Was it tagline? I don't know what they call it. Bone Kickers. History is now. I mean, what does that even mean? There's one bit in it where the young guy with the torch there, he just goes, "Excuse me," into a bunch of people. I'm an archaeologist, as if, like FBI. And I've always wanted to do that. I'd like to have an archaeology pass where I've got my University of Chester staff pass, but, I'd like to be able to go, archaeologist, where's the crime? Where's the body? Where in the UK has been your favourite site? My favourite site? That's a good question, Roxell858. And thank you for that question. Which is my favourite site? As an archaeologist, I love many townscapes. I love countryside. There's many beautiful archaeological sites. Many sites that have been excavated, many sites that have never been excavated. At one level, every field and every hillside is a archaeological site waiting to happen. But if I was going to say my favourite archaeological site that I've worked on, I've been to Sutton Hoo again recently, and I dug at Sutton Hoo with part of the team directed by Martin Carver when I was a student. And so Sutton Hoo is one of the sites I always talk about as my favourite site. It is a really distinctive location. And it is a real distinctive location to really understand not only the burial mounds but the broader landscape. So I talk about it a lot and I teach about it, and I've published 2 or 3 papers on Sutton Hoo, two articles on Sutton Hoo. 3 actually, sorry, yeah, I forgot the other one. So yeah, Sutton Hoo, I will say, and it's a National Trust site. You can go visit it. They've revamped and overhauled all the heritage interpretation, so go and see Sutton Hoo if you haven't visited it already. It's well worth it. Yeah, so that would be my favourite site. It's not my personal favourites, the ones I've dug. So there's others I could talk about, and my local one, which I've got TikToks on, is the Pillar of Elizeg near Llangollen. So go and check that one out. But that's my favourite site. Thank you, Roxy, for that one. That's really good. Or Roxl. Sorry, I don't know how people make up their username. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. John again. I've got one. How much do you think we've got left to discover in archaeology? Oh, do you want a cerebral answer, John? Do you want a cerebral answer? Okay, here's a cerebral answer. Archaeology is the study of the humanity through its material remains. Given the fact that we are improving our techniques, our methods, our research, and the parameters of the subject are expanding, and given the volume of our material culture we've produced, even in the last century, we've transformed this planet. We've screwed this planet. We have literally plastic the bottoms of the sea to the highest mountain. Everest is covered in corpses of mountaineers in various high visibility clothing that will never be pulled off there. The deepest ocean is full of our plastic, and everywhere in between. We've turned the planet into a human dump. Our bodies, our refuse. And we've even, many people talk about we've moved into a new epoch. We are no longer in the Holocene, we are in the Anthropocene. We are in the time of human climate change, of human destruction of the world. So on one level, our job will never be done until we're gone. And indeed, we're producing new archaeological material all the time. So the question is not how much do you think we've got left to discover? It's more, how much more stuff will people produce to be discovered? There you are. That's my cerebral answer. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Yeah. Wow. That's deep, Howard. That's so deep. Wow. You must be a professor or something to come up with something like that. Or maybe just on wine. But no, that's my serious answer is actually no. Archaeology will never be done. Because there'll always be more shit to dig up. On a large groundbreaking scale. Yeah, I mean, I know it. Right, okay. So the popular question, I'll come back to your question then and answer it in a different way. I've done the cerebral. I think the other point is that with the volume of our material, the archaeological record is ever growing rather than decreasing. We may be trashing, we have looters trashing old sites, we may be destroying old sites, but we're ever increasing. The other point is that the archaeological record is going microscopic. With ADNA, with microanalysis of chemical composition of objects, with the ability to investigate thin layers of material in a way that, a microscopic thin section analysis of soil even, and deposits, residues. This is really enhancing our understanding of periods we thought we had done and dusted, that we thought we understood. So actually, the archaeological record isn't simply growing more newer and bigger in volume of material, but actually our understanding, how we actually can interrogate past remains is getting richer. And the third way of answering your question is actually we're pushing back in time our refinement of chronology, our ability to understand complex early societies. I'm not talking about Graham Hancock bullshit about whole civilizations that existed building fuck off pyramids for no good reason. I'm talking about the actual refined understanding. And that is groundbreaking. It's not about just first discovery, like we have now found a new whole civilization. It's we're realizing that the cultures or civilizations that we once thought existed are now 50 or 60 different civilizations or cultures or communities, and that we can understand how they operated differently within a particular time period or place. So the archaeological record is growing, getting more refined, and becoming much more complex. And so that's all groundbreaking in terms of scales, but it's not the scales about in terms of discovering a new species, like in a sort of that's the headline news for, say, botany or zoology, or something like that. It's groundbreaking in terms of understanding a much more complex picture of the human past. That's my take. I was going to finish by talking about the Jubilee because, I've been ill all weekend and I'm absolutely shattered, and I've had one night's sleep that's good sleep in the last week, but I missed the Jubilee. I'm probably going to miss it anyway, and I don't want to bash the Queen or bash the royal family. They get bashed enough, and I don't want to bash the anyone enjoyed themselves. I had enjoyed the time. That's not my point. But what I was struck by was the vociferous comments I got back for simply criticising a heritage organisation for the way they wanted to honour the Jubilee, which is within my remit. And that's really the weird thing, isn't it? Is people are so angry about this. And if they're so angry defending something that's so well entrenched, no one's going to decommission the Queen tomorrow based on a TikTok. She's polling badly on TikTok, but pull the Queen. It's not going to bloody happen. These people are stinking rich. They're well established. They don't need to be defended. and yet people will defend them. The other week I just said something snarky about Elon Musk, and the number of people wading in out of nowhere defending Elon Musk. Like, these people don't need us to defend them, and I think that's what's really frustrates me about the whole thing, is that whatever our take, our political view, these celebrities, they are celebrities. They are the established elite. They don't need our defence. That whether it's like with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Oh, whatever you think about that, they don't need us to defend them. These people are stinking rich. Yeah, they've got problems. Yeah, they've got issues. Some of this, whatever's happened, it's very sad. But that's the thing that I find most difficult about this social media stuff, is knowing just how passionate people get about not only fictional characters, not only dead people, but actually living celebrity culture. That celebrities really are the one constant that stay alive and well. So I'm going to watch out for that. But I did got to use a few more John Burko replies, so check those out if you haven't. Anyway, thank you for your time, and I will go now. 16,000 followers. Thank you, all of you. And I will see you again at some point, I'm sure. And in the meantime, keep learning about archaeology. It's the future and the past and the present. Farewell.
If you've enjoyed this Archaeodeath video, why not check out the Archaeodeath blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.